Okay, great. So we are back on the main stage now. Thank you all, the speakers, moderators, panelists, for those 9 very interesting panels, and quite a lot of good topics. We'll come back to that in a second when I'm here with Elias. This is now going to be a 2 or 3 minute update on what we're doing for our summit and awards. Call it an advertorial, if you will. That's fine. We'll do a little bit of a screen share here. Mr. Tutak, if you're ready for that. I'm just going to go through very quickly what we're doing. We are set for our 9th annual CEE Business Services Summit and Awards. The date is April 14 and 15. It will be a hybrid format, which means it will be on this platform, Hopin, which keeps getting better and stronger with lots of improvements, and in person in Warsaw at a new venue, which we'll tell you about next week. The number of people, it's a complicated thing for us. The world's more complicated. It's complicated for us as organizers as well. Hybrids are much more complex and difficult to do, but we're also very excited about it. So 14, 15 April in Warsaw, and what we're going to do is limit the number of people to 100 top BSC executives. So it's limited. We're going to limit it to that number. We know that not everyone's going to come like before. We understand that, but we do think we'll have a big number on the Hopin platform. Next slide, if you would, Mr. Tutek. So we are also excited about the awards again, and we have 27 awards categories this year. The nominations process is open. We had quite a few come in last week already. So that will be open till February 28th. They are similar to last year with about 5 to 7 changes and 4 to 5 that we deleted, I think quite relevant. So those are open till February 28th. We also have a number of speakers, again, for the 2 days. Next slide, please. We expect the summit to be similar as last year, 2 days. The pre-day, which is the 14th, will be all about process automation, machine learning, AI applied to shared service centers. And so the very specialized pre-day on the 14th, again, fully broadcast on Hopin. Probably about 20 speakers on that particular day. The main day, the 15th, will be our executive summit, as usual. Features about newcomers to the market, a number of other issues relevant to the shared service center directors. Today will be a pretty good teaser as to what those might be going forward. But in general, we'll have about 45 speakers over the 2 days, a hell of a lot. And as I said, about 27 awards categories for that. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys physically there, the small number that will be there, and the rest of you on the Hopin platform. So without further ado, let me wrap up here for this, let's say, installment, and we'll bring in Elias to give us a bit of a summary of the day and comment on some of the particular 9 panels, and then we'll wrap up after that session. So I'm going to go off the main stage now, join you back on this in a few minutes with Elias. So thank you. And thank you guys all for being here today. Hello, Elias. How are you?
I'm good, Tom. It's been a wonderful and very exciting afternoon. How about you?
Yeah, it's been good. I think it's been quite interesting. Good crowd attendance. Some of the sessions were bigger than others, and but all very, very interesting. And really good crowd of SSC directors. So,
you know, when you mentioned the idea to, probably wrong, but also myself a couple of months back, you said, "Hey, don't we need like a platform for senior leaders of shared services in Central Europe to talk together?" And you always come up with a new idea, and this one I think was very successful. What I liked about it the roundtables, the groups were relatively small, and so which allowed really a lot of people to contribute, to speak freely. There was that, like you offered us, these will be closed conversations. And yeah, I mean, I took a lot of notes. I learned a lot. Hopefully people took up something from what I said as well. It's definitely was worth all the time. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, part of the idea behind it was, of course, that the stultifyingly boring webinars that we're all forced to listen to sometimes. I don't listen to any of them anymore, but the webinars are simply mostly one way, and they're pretty damn boring. And what I try to do here today is recreate the idea of peer-to-peer conversations behind the doors, behind the scenes, one-on-one conversations, private conversations, and the networking that we're all missing. So we're really missing the chance to meet each other. And I think the Hopin platform allows us to do that as well as we can, given this current situation.
Yeah, and I think this is even better than networking, because there were like 9 key topics out there, and people gathered, and these were focused discussions, focused Q&As. Of course, I had a slide and Romek had a slide, but that's why both of us are consultants. But it really, I mean, when you go to live events, I mean, it's mostly one-on-one conversations. And here you allowed us to gather around focal themes that were close to everybody's heart or mind or priority set. And I think this is definitely, well, it's something I really enjoyed. I made new friends, I met old friends, and definitely there was a lot of sharing. And the fact that you're doing that in a smaller groups of 7 to 10 people max, that for me worked really well, really well.
Yeah. And I think some of these sessions, in fact, we look at the numbers here. We had, some of them had 25 to 29 people in some of the sessions, which is a testament to the interest in the subject and the speakers themselves, or the panelists themselves. Let me ask you this, Elias. Let's talk through some of the sessions, a little bit takeaways. So the first one, I know neither one of us got to listen to all of them. So maybe between the two of us, we can pick up some of it. But the digital transformation tactics for SAP-based SSEs was the first one of the first ones. Did you get a chance to listen to any of that at all?
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
No.
Okay, well, that's kind of a really niche subject. So for those who have SAP-based SSEs, which is quite a lot of them, of course, the digitalization of that is obvious trend. Since neither of us was there, so we'll skip that one. The next one is location selection, which was in fact you. So I think you were in that session. Give us a bit of a summary, because I didn't hear you. I couldn't listen to that one.
Yeah, there was a technological hiccup a little bit on my side. So, but basically, I think we explored a couple of things. First of all, on trends, is location really dead? And well, it's all but dead is the answer. It's still about talent. It's still about being close to talent. It's still about offering people a space where they can work together, meet together. We'll come back to that a bit later, be it only for a couple of days a week, but people still need that. And indeed, talent is not that mobile in most of the European countries. And so you got to get closer to the talent. Now, there are some challenges to that. It was mentioned by Stefan, who runs the Shared Service Center in Cluj-Napoca. He said, well, I cannot leave because the talent is here and I need university students. But he was challenged by other people who really suggested, yeah, but hang on, why don't you start a secondary site at small scale in a nearby tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 city? And of course, the folks from Bigos spoke to that, and they see that as an option. But there were many examples that we found of companies who are actually doing that today. And so you got to get closer to the talents. There's something else about talent and location. Because like we discussed in the session on location, I mean, talent concentrates around cities, around education centers. That is a fact. And what you can also do, you will not really find all the talent you need. So aside from getting close to the talent, accept the fact that you cannot only buy the talent, you may do so initially, but then, like Romek underlined in one of the other sessions, the job is really to build the talent. So there's a mixture there. There's a very nice interplay really, between where you locate and what you do with the talent there. If you sit back and wait for the Big Macs to arrive, like in a McDonald's drive-in, that's no longer going to work. The war for talent is everywhere. But you can go to secondary cities, tertiary cities, have a in-country wage cost reduction of 20%. which is not much, but we still have wage cost arbitrage from Western Europe coming to Central Europe. That's why we are alive as a sector in the first place. So you can capture a little additional saving, but you can access a talent pool. Is it perfect? No. But then again, there is no perfection anymore. So you'll have to build, and why not build indeed in a secondary location? Those were some of the topics that we did discuss in a location panel, also on remote work, but I'd like to touch upon that because I attended a brilliant session by Claudia on the topic work from home and how to onboard in that.
And a busy session as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you want to touch on that right now? We can jump to that one and come back to the other.
Yeah. We can definitely hang on. Let me see my notes because so this was about onboarding and working from home. Can we really onboard virtual? And I think the answer is that some of the onboarding can be done virtual. There were examples cited by people in Lithuania who actually said the first day they come at the office, they get their equipment, the first log on in Wi-Fi needs to be on corporate Wi-Fi for a variety of reasons that we all understand. But then the second day, they already start working from home. There was Peter Mitchell from ABV who said, well, yeah, we have the onboarding, and then we have the 30, 60, and 120 engagement, where indeed physical proximity is required. And so onboarding works, but if you don't do a proper follow-up with a regular physical touch base so that people can exchange ideas, feel comfortable speaking to their management and speaking up to their management, if you don't have the possibility to actually talk to people to sense how they are doing, then indeed your onboarding will fail. So I guess the takeaway from on working remote on onboarding is you can go a long way, but if there's no engagement, if there's no communication, if there's no information following up on the onboarding, you will fail eventually. So on virtual onboarding, that can be done, but it goes hand in hand with all the other aspects of talent management and talent development. And that is where sometimes we see a disconnect between the people in HR that do the onboarding and the people that need to manage the business as managers, as team leaders.
Well, that's a decent segue to the team building tips, which is one of the sessions that I moderated. And that was also a pretty decent crowd in there. And a lot of talk about specific ideas and techniques and tools, things like wine tastings that with the sommelier to have a group sessions there using tools like Kahoot and Scribble, quite a few others, but a lot of good, very specific ideas that people have used, and some that don't work. That talk about different types of sports, outdoor sports. One of them talked about doing morning fitness routines together to kind of peer-to-peer pressure to get yourself to moving in the morning together as a team. So quite a few good ideas in that session as well. Good takeaways and good specific action points.
There was something else, and people don't talk about it that much, but I guess that some concerted action might be needed. In one of the sessions, again, it was on remote work, but there are some regulative barriers to really making remote work possible. For instance, it was Lukas Wojciak who really pointed to the fact that Polish regulations do not allow for work to be taxed where it's being conducted. So there's a fiscal barrier. There were friends of ours from Lithuania who actually evoked the permanent resident status. So if people would be out of country or out of state too long, then all of a sudden the legal forces will clamp down on us. So I think there's a job for the ABSLs and the other lobbying organizations of this world to pick up on that, because we have that as a barrier.
Yes.
There was an interesting comment, if I might pursue, by Bartosz Pricula, the office landlord, the developer. And he was very frank, but he also said, look, the office will be there, probably in different role, maybe in different shape, but he sensed that in the context that he has with his tenants, indeed, there is still a clear need for office.
And I think that White Star, his company, they have offices all over Central Eastern Europe, including 2 big office projects in Warsaw and in Krakow. And lucky or smart, they seem to have these park concepts, suburban park concepts, which may indeed be more popular going forward than the huge sky rises. I don't know, but it may be an interesting point as well. Yeah.
There's a point connected to that, but it came out of the session of 10 $1 million ideas, and maybe wanted me to address that just later.
Okay, good. But I think it was also, again, a big crowd, much larger people in the audience on the offices than I had expected. Obviously, extremely important. It's also interesting that we've got polls to the right. By the way, if you all have not voted yet in the polls, top right of your screen, do that again. But it's also interesting to see what some of the polls are. And some of that was, I was surprised how many people are not reducing their total office space. Yeah, big crowd, much larger people in the audience. Hold on one second. Than I had expected. Yep. Can you still hear me there? Okay. Yeah. So that's also kind of interesting. Let me jump back for a second and talk about process automation. That was rather the process mining and process automation. We also had those two sessions. Obviously, the process automation world is not as sexy, perhaps, as some of the HR issues and people issues, but they're extremely important. And there was conversation about extracting 8 to 10% savings out of processes. And the question came up, if I can save 8 to 10%, someone said, well, that's not a lot. And someone said, well, actually, it's a hell of a lot. If I can save 8% across the board on a process, that's a hell of a lot, especially if you invest much in the process. So that's interesting. I was surprised we didn't have people in those particular sessions. Maybe it's a little bit less sexy, but from a return on investment perspective, very important. And one person said on the process mining and the data mining that perhaps it's still too early in the stage, and that might be a hot issue in 1 or 2 years. I don't know if you have thoughts about that as a consultant.
I think we're not too early in the process. The process is right, but automation, machine learning, AI, and RPA, I mean, it requires one thing: standardized information feed. And we touched upon that when we were discussing the 10 million bucks ideas. And indeed, automation is a way to save, but it requires standardization. And one of the team, it was Romek again, he mentioned that actually 80% of the standardization needs to happen in the business before it reaches the center. And so I think that we haven't seen the end of automation yet. But like we all know, the frontline business, they like to do it their way. The Dutch do it their way. The Belgians, the French, they all have their own way of handling the information because that is how it has been done for years. But yes, if we as a sector are to save money for the frontline business, to reinvest in their education and in our own, of course, then we should all work together. And it starts with standardization. That's 80% of the work happens there before you feed it into an algorithm. That was one of the conclusions that our panel identified.
Okay. I'm going to come back to $10 million ideas in this panel as the last one. Let me jump ahead and then come back. The Innovation Showcase, which was a little bit different format for us. And by the way, we're trying different formats. We've done different things before. This is the first time we've done the Roundtables. We're also learning new things, testing new things. And my view is let's learn fast as we possibly can. And so the Innovation Showcase was a presentation by Laszlo Balashi of Active Graph. And what they are doing is using algorithms and machine learning to look at factors that influence employee burnout and to reduce those. But the real trick of what they're doing is it's a real-time change to a graph, so that one takes a finger and pulls the graph up. If I save 3% of that turnover, what's the impact on my bottom line? So really interesting service that they've got for large corporates, relevant to anyone doing predictive work and relevant to SSEs who are looking at case studies, projections going forward for their groups. I don't know if you got a chance to look at that one.
Anyway. I didn't, but what you say makes a lot of sense, because what we do in our centers, I mean, we thrive on data. We create value because of speed, because of simplification, automation, and we extract information that's value add. So why, if that is what we do, then I think we should lend our ear to companies like the one you just mentioned, who can help us to thrive on the data we produce on our operations to improve further. Yeah, and I think that is something we will see going forward. It will be more something that will be generated in the centers and will only gradually hit the frontline business, simply because we are better at exchanging information within our organizations and among our organizations than what happens in the front line.
So I joined the $10 million ideas session late. In fact, I decided to finish one earlier panel on process automation earlier so we could join it. And I'm glad I did, but I missed some of the first parts of it. So can you give me a little bit of a recap of, 4 or 5 points for that?
Well, actually, we vowed to remain silent because we're going to make $1 million in next month. But no, speaking more seriously, there were too many ideas out there. Let me just list a couple. It is now that we need to move the scope. The pandemic proved that the centers can take on more work than anybody thought possible, than maybe even we thought possible. We need to push the frontline businesses, the people that control our organization, say, hey, this is a proof of concept. We can do that. And on that line, there was also the thought, well, let's be bold. We did the impossible, or what we thought was impossible in the last 10 months. So isn't now the phrase not what can I do for you, but shouldn't the question be, why can't I do this for you? And let's push ourselves, let's push the front line. It's about a new scope, actually. There were some ideas on office space and quite some interesting ones. So we discussed, very quickly, in an international business, whether you receive the guests or whether you need to go out to the business, you're spending money on travel. Yes. Well, all that money has not been spent. And did we really falter because are not spending that? I put it, we do not. So we kind of said, well, why don't we look at all these costs, all the budgets, to the extent to which they were consumed, and ask ourselves the question, do we really need that much coffee? Do we need those cookies? Do we need these entertainment functions? Or can we use that budget to actually invest in upskilling our people, invest in automation, all that kind of stuff? So that could be another saving point.
Yeah, my thing on travel is that there'll be, obviously there's going to be less of it, but there ought to be where people choose to do the bigger events, the bigger things once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, and they just don't do it as frequently as before, right? Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, and there are other things that happened. There was Roland, and I think he's with Cody. His business actually received paper invoices.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, and in COVID, with everybody eating from remote, he said, paper invoice, no can do, PDF any time of day. Yeah. And so the whole business switched. Now, can you imagine the printing costs, the papers, the prints, the sending costs?
Just the silliness of the whole process.
That has all disappeared with Cody. Then another idea that came up, and this was from Stefan Kovanciu in Cluj-Napoca. So he has a seasonal business because he caters services to the packaging industry for the harvest in Italy. And actually what he has done with other smaller size shared service centers in Cluj-Napoca, northwestern Romania, is they move their workforces. They have a pool that is shared with businesses that do not have the same peak loads.
Huh. Interesting.
That there was also Michał from Warsaw who commented that there had been initiatives in Warsaw to talk about that. All these people that help us implement automation, you basically only need them for 6 months. So why not develop a pool rather than you pay the full ticket for that outsourcing firm or that consultant? Why not develop a pool and hoover it around? I mean, you can see the cost go down very, very quickly on that one. There was a combination of various points between remote work, tier 2 cities that offer a cost saving, of course, like Michał from Bydgoszcz explained to us earlier on, and real estate. And so a idea is, I mean, since we're all talking, and since we all need a certain generic pool of skills, and we need that labor, but not on a permanent basis, why not set up like a farm, a barn, like in FBI terms, but a barn somewhere in a tier 3 city. We developed with the infrastructure, we got the talent there will be the university, there is the cost saving, and we just rotate these APAR or other general ledger specialists, all depending on needs. So it's like creating a cooperative for certain functions, for certain processes, for certain skill sets. That was one of the other $1 million ideas. Basically, a lot of good came out, a lot of practical stuff, daring stuff, but the last 10 months have been pretty daring. So
Yes,
I
yes.
think that there are still many areas where we can make $1 million in savings and still improving the bottom line of the business that we do.
Yeah. Let me jump around a little bit. As you're in a new position in Colliers, congrats again. I think that's a great move. And we talk about remote work, etc. And Russia, we had a couple of Russians for the first time at our sessions. They won from Gazprom, and also Ukraine. Let's talk about more remote places like Greece, like Egypt, like Moldova, Bulgaria. I mean, what are you seeing from your clients, let's say globally? Has their perception changed? Or is their mind opened a bit more to possibilities that may not just be in the core Central European markets?
Definitely it has. So Kiev, definitely. Lviv, indeed, absolutely. They made their mark. They're in. They're not that big yet, but that's simply because it's not that well documented. I mean, there are a number of very nice multiple function shared service centers and outsourcing providers actually in Lviv. Moldova is a very interesting country. IT absolutely is it. It has a very European culture, half Latin, associated with the Romanian culture. So that is working. Costs are low, people are highly motivated, and foremost, the government is making a big deal out of BPO services, as they call it back there.
Yeah.
You mentioned Egypt. I think that there's one thing that we should consider. I mean, when we look at either you tap more transactional skills, and that can be done anywhere in the world. I mean, that's one of the reasons why India initially came out and really developed as a very favorable destination. So transactional you can do in Egypt, but let's not forget that in Egypt we've got more than 220,000 people working in the sector, from AT, HR, customer service. 220,000.
Wow.
So the point is, like, I'm not suggesting that it would be at a different level than the Polish level of ecosystem development. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But the point is, it's a very large scale. So the likelihood of finding good talent in the Cairo area, they got like 7 areas where they focus for business services, are very, very high. And I see it with one of the client projects we're doing, where we're actually asking ourselves the question, is Cairo an overflow location for what we have in Central Europe? Or can it really be something more and an add-on to tap pools of people that might be very hard to get or otherwise very costly in Europe? So I think that location-wise, there are a couple of things happening out there that have been continuing over the last 10 months. Yeah.
Okay. Shifting gears again, you're kind of plugged into the global network of Colliers, and I'm curious what you hear from U.S. companies or Western European companies about these new centers. We still see some new shared service centers coming into Central Europe. Give us a feel for the urgency of that. I mean, the cost issues. Is there still more to come from the U.S. and from Western Europe and for Central European SSEs?
So first, I mean, I've long said we shouldn't focus on cost, we should focus on value. And
Right.
absolutely signed by that. This being said, that is rule number 1 applies first, and it is about cost. Of course it's about cost.
Yeah.
As long as the region of Central Europe maintains a positive wage cost arbitrage, which it does across many processes that we have in our BSCs, the region is in the game. What we saw actually over the last 10 months, and I looked at some data from Moody's, they've got a specialized service for that, and is that indeed the number of jobs created in business service centers globally declined by 50%. Well, no surprise, all businesses declined their investments and expansion by 50% across the board. So why would we be different? But if you look at the numbers in detail and you look at what's been happening in Central Europe, actually we decrease less pro rata than the rest of the world, which indicates that, gives me the indication, let me put it that way, that there is something in this region that really works well. And it's not only cost, it is value. So I think that if you would look at the data of the whole COVID period, I wouldn't be surprised to find that indeed Central Europe did relatively well in terms of still creating jobs. And so to your point, is there a prospect for the region going forward? Yes, there has been a lesser decline in a very difficult period of the global economy. So whenever that stables out, give me one reason why we shouldn't get up on our feet very quickly again.
Right. Okay. I think many people have really not fallen off their feet for the most part in this sector. It's a pretty resilient, strong sector, except for those who have been directly affected by the top line, like the airlines and the hotels. Right. Let's finish. And I'd like for you to stay on screen as I do a bit of a wrap up here of the day and just say a couple of comments and last words. And once again, for those of you who want to join in the one-on-one meetings, you can do that on the right-hand side. Finish throwing a couple of polls there. And by all means, also, please send me feedback, suggestions, criticisms. We're in the process of learning how to make these things work better. Whatever the new things might be, we're open to the ideas. But please give me feedback, unfettered comments and suggestions. I also, again, make a plug for our 14-15 April summit and awards. It'll be a quite interesting, I think. I'm excited about it. I'm a little bit scared about it. It's going to be a big deal for us to do the hybrid version, both on Hopin and physically, with about 100 VIP SSC directors here in Warsaw. But I'm excited about it. We're also in the process now of recruiting speakers for that, and also in the process of recruiting the new and fresh jury members as well. So please contact me for either one of those as well. I want to say last words, thanks to the Wolves Digital team, which are behind me here in this very big office in Wrocław, to Wojtek and Antek on the video team here on the other side, but also back in here is Rosie and Rafał. Who else? We got Magda and Anya and Joasha, Alicia, Mike and Martin, Danuta. Thank all of you guys very much for your huge work. And we are very pleased to pull off another, I think this is our 6th Hopin platform event. Thank you guys all for joining. Looking forward to your suggestions and feedback. Really interesting day. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. Hope that you have as well. And we'll be back with you very soon. See you soon. Thank you.